review. Book 101 is all about the books on the road for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's an author, podcast host, and of course, storyteller. No other than Mr. Branch Isole.
Hello, Daniel. How are you doing tonight? Thank you for having me on.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Brands, and I'm fabulous, fabulous like you. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me explain a little bit about my writing history. I'm the author of 22 different books. Five of those are nonfiction, 18 are fiction. And I started writing in the year 2000. So it's been 25 years and 22 books. So it's been a busy time.
Busy, busy indeed. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with the world. And Mr. Brands, let's talk about emotional connectivity and the power of storytelling. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. Storytelling started back when people lived in caves, and that was the communication model for not only education, passing on from generation to generation how to survive, but it also became basis for all entertainment. They'd sit around the fire and talk about their lives and their days, and it was all about storytelling. That's how they communicated with each other about their lives and the things that they faced. And same thing holds true today. All storytelling is about sharing different emotional states through different activities and situations that we find ourselves in. So if you look at really good stories, the ones that sort of capture your imagination, they usually have underlying themes of emotional investment between the story and the storyteller and how they present the story to the reader. The idea for the author, obviously, is to hook the reader in and bring them along as the story develops. And one of the easiest ways to keep that reader engaged is to keep pulling at their emotions as the story unfolds. So that's the importance of emotional connectivity between the protagonist and the antagonist in the story as the story plays out in whatever the plot may be. But having that emotional hook, that emotional connectivity, was what the author's trying to produce in order to keep the reader engaged.
Okay, so how would you relate your book Seduction to storytelling, Mr. Brands?
Well, Seduction is a nonfiction book. And so, what it is, it's sort of a comparative survey of sexual relationships between men and women. And it's got some emotional connectivity in it, that's for sure. But it basically is written for young men, high school, college age, in their late 20s, early 30s, who are out there in the world doing the romantic game, and it helps the reader understand what it is women are looking for in that romance relationship, and it also helps the female reader understand and help her man along if he needs some encouragement and a little bit of coaching on the side to fulfill her particular needs.
Interesting book of yours, Mr. Brands. And what happens in the brain when a story creates a strong emotional connection, and how can storytellers leverage this?
Well, the leveraging is the whole reason that you want to use this emotional connection. The deeper the connection with the reader, the more they're drawn into the story. And obviously, what we're trying to do as authors is get them reading and keep them reading. So that's why the emotional connectivity is such an important piece when you're developing the story. And that's why you see, if you read novels or you see a lot of storytelling in the visual media, in movies and things, in the video world, all of the characters are having connections with each other, but the things that they're encountering, the things that they're going through, are also things that a lot of people in the audience are going through. And that's why you have different characters involved in different situations, drawing upon different emotions. Love is an emotion, but revenge is also an emotion. So many of the characters in any given story have different emotions that they are relating to the reader. And this way, you connect with different readers where they are in their own lives. Because as we go through life, any given day, you can be in love or you can be out of love, or you can be, just lost your job. That's a new emotion. Get divorced. That's a different emotion. So there's a lot of different emotions that you can develop in any given story, and you normally develop those through the different characters in the story.
Mr. Branch, why is vulnerability critical for building emotional bridges between storytellers and audiences?
Well, that's an interesting question, Daniel, because vulnerability is one of the two things that we share as human beings, right? Um, all of us have situations in our daily lives and from our past experiences where we have been sort of on top at different times, and we may have been on the bottom of the pile at different times. And vulnerability as an emotion is one thing that connects us as human beings, because we all, at some point in our relationships, at home, at work, may be vulnerable. And having experienced that emotion, when we see someone in that same situation that we may not be, but we can still identify with them and whatever they're dealing with in their vulnerability because we know that emotion firsthand.
Very well said, Mr. Branch. Beautifully articulated. Very well said. How do you create characters or personas that audiences feel for, even in nonfiction or business contexts?
Well, first you've got to determine what the story is going to be about and what you are going to write in order to get out of the story to transfer not only the characters but their situation, and then the emotions are what give that character his foundation in the part of the story. So except for academic books, which have specific themes and design, but for a general fiction book, if you've got characters, then you're going to try and develop those characters again so that they will connect with different readers. That's why all the characters in the story sort of are going through different scenarios in their life as a story character, but it draws all the characters together. So it's like a spider web, right? In the center, you've got by design what the story is going to be about and why. And then as your web is developed, you bring in different characters who are experiencing different parts of whatever the main story is about. So it's like a spider web. But the thing that holds it all together, if you visualize a spider web, right, you've got all these concentric circles, and in between all of those circles, keeping them all together, are the little vertical sections. Well, that vertical piece is that emotional part of the structure. So the story develops from the inside out, from the center, and develops in these different rings. That's the, each of the characters, and then the thing that draws them all together and keeps the story cohesive is that emotional string.
Mr. Branch, can you relate our topic to one of your books that you wrote?
Well, you see, in my fiction books, in the 18 fiction books, they're all short stories and poetry stories, prose. And so the whole design between all of the stories in those books, every book has 52 different stories. And so each one of those stories deals with a different theme, uh, a different emotional theme, actually. And then from the emotional theme, you get the story development. And the idea behind these stories is generally there's no more than one or two characters in the story. But the character that's in the story is designed to relate directly to the reader. I often get comments from people who say, "Oh, I read this book and I really love these stories," right? And then a lot of people write and they say, "Well, I read this book and I really didn't like this story too much." And what I find is that whether they like a story or whether they have an issue with the story, that I know it kind of hit home with them on an emotional level, what I find is the ones who read stories that they really connect with, they want to keep reading until they read another story that they can connect with again. And the people who have a difficult time or say, I didn't like that story, they may not tell me why, but they say, I hated that story or I didn't like that story. And again, I think it's because whatever the emotion structure is in the story probably hit home. But they too then are motivated to keep reading to find another story because even though they may not have liked what they read, if they identified with it emotionally, then they want that emotion again. So they keep reading, and that's the idea. And that's why the stories are different. They come from different protagonists or different heroes or different main characters who are telling that story. But the idea is always this connectivity. And if the emotion is the key for the connectivity, then you can be pretty well assured that they're going to respond to the story, good or bad, but there'll be a response there. And that's the whole idea about behind writing. That's why we write, is so that you make a connection with the reader that stays with them. A lot of my stories have kind of a twist at the end. And I have people say, well, I got done with the story and it ended. I just didn't think about it that way. And it's like a V8 moment that they're struck with something where all of a sudden at the end of the story took a twist or a turn that they hadn't expected. And that's always kind of a reward for the reader, one way or the other, when they're surprised. It's like watching an old uh, Twilight Zone episode or an old 50s Alfred Hitchcock, you know, uh, TV show. There's always some sort of a twist that you don't expect at the end. And that's it's kind of like the uh, toy in the box and what was that popcorn candy that always had the surprise in the box, right? And that's the
Yes.
whole idea is they get to the end of the story and there was a surprise there. And that's oh man, I didn't expect it to be that way. So that's a fun part of writing, when you can develop a story that takes one track and then all of a sudden ends up in a different place. And some people enjoy that, and some people go, "Oh, I got tricked." But it's just a style of writing. It's trying to make the mechanics of the writing work with the story. So the twists and the turns or the surprise at the end, is a fulfilling one, even if they go, "Wow, I just didn't think about that."
Very well said, Mr. Brown. Very well said. And thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. As an author and podcast host, what are your short term and long term goals?
Well, my long-term goal is to keep, touching readers and taking them on a journey. My podcast goal, we focus on personal, career, and spiritual relationship growth on my podcast, which is called Patient Zero. Um, we deal with real life, experiences that people that listen to the podcast can identify with. But every episode, the real short episodes, 15 minutes or less, but each episode provides tools and tips and takeaways that the listener can use in their own life.
Well, good luck to your goals, Mr. Brands, and hoping for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be an author and to be a podcast host like you?
Wow. Well, for those people who are looking to be an author, uh, the hard work is after your book is finished. It can be a long, hard trail to get them from manuscript to published book. But when you get with that book in your hand, that's when all the hard work starts because all of your efforts then are in the marketing and you're basically on your own for the marketing. So that's the hard part for those people who want to be an author.
Yes, indeed. And I think Mr. Brands is disconnected. So while we're waiting for him, let's continue our discussion. And I want to invite you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and book 101 review in its fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and food 101 in its fifth season as well. Geography 101 in its fourth season, and My Baby Podcast, Mental Health 101, and Law 101. Love Letters in its third season, and Movie 101 review in its fourth season, as well as My Music 101, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. And Mr. Branch, thank you so much for your advice and hoping for people that watching us right now, they will follow you. What's one practice people can start today to become more intentional about emotional connectivity in their storytelling?
Well, um, if you have a lot of experiences, draw upon your experiences from your past. All authors basically write about things that they know, and they basically write about their own story in some form or fashion. So, whatever your base of experiences are, and this is why if you've got some age on you or some maturity, you have more experiences to draw from. So, that's my advice.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. Brands. And I hope people are listening will inspire of what we're talking about. Have you ever crafted a story that did not emotionally land? And what did that teach you?
Well, I'm sure I have a story that didn't land, but you never know unless you hear directly from readers what their experience with the story was. You just never know. So it's let me see if I can find this quote real quick, which sort of sums up what you've just asked. Um,
You never know, people. Probably we're the next Mr. Brands Isole to the world. A podcast host as well as an author. And please do check Mr. Brand's books. There's a lot of books on Amazon. Uh, Seduction, even Christians stumble and fail. Yeah, that's true. Orgy of words, electricity. What else? God, I believe. Barking geckos, crucibles, power of praise, postcard line of democra- democration. Yes,
Demarcation.
demarcation. Sorry, reflection on chrome seeds of Manao and
Manaho.
many, yeah, Manao and many more. Please do support Mr. Brands because are lots of books to be discovered. Go ahead for your quote, Mr. Brands.
Here's something I keep in mind all the time when I'm writing. It's a Samuel Johnson quote, and it says, "It's advantageous to an author that his book should be attacked as well as praised. Fame is a shuttlecock. If it be struck at only one end of the room, it will soon fall to the ground. To keep it up, it must be struck at both ends." So
Nice.
you need the praise from readers, and you need to accept the criticism from readers, because even if they're criticizing, you know that they're reading.
Indeed, both people, both. And thank you for sharing that quote, Mr. Brands. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my audiobooks, people. Audiobooks available on Audible. And my Book 101 Review, Volume 1, highly recommended. Book 101 Review, Volume 3, suggestions. And Book 101 Review, Volume 2, selected. These are my 100 episodes of my Book 101 Review first season. And of course, my climate change book, Earth Fever and Reveling Climate and Our Race to Restore Balance, and my self-help books, Threads of Existence, Weaving the Tapestry of Life. Life is too short, a journey of discovery, fulfillment, and joy. And stand tall, stand together, breaking the chains of bullying. Available on Audible and one of the bestsellers. Please listen to them because they are one of a kind. Mr. Brands, how can we maintain deep emotional connections in an era of short form content and AI generated narratives?
Wow. Yeah, that's a big bucket to fill. Again, think about the emotional connection to your readers, and that key is the vulnerability. See, we all experience the same 12 lessons in life throughout our lives. And so, if you know what those 12 lessons of life are, then you've got 12 hooks for your story to draw from. And by using those 12 lessons of life hooks, you're guaranteed to always be connecting with someone out there who's reading your books or listening to your podcast.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Branch Isole. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast as well as your books?
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that. Yeah, they can find me just my name, Branch Isole. It takes you to all the links.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Brands Isole because if you support him, more and more and more empowering episodes for the podcast itself, more and more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Brands, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
More to come, people. See you soon.